Okay, so this is one type of drawing paper. This is charcoal paper. And what's the difference between these two papers is the tooth. Sometimes if you come really close to the surface of the paper, you can see this tooth. And you can really see it better if you rub a little bit of charcoal over it. Just rub it here. So you rub charcoal and kind of smudge it with your finger. You will see this is a little bit smoother paper. Here, when you rub and you smudge it with your finger, you see a little bit more of the texture of the paper. So you can see that two differences. Let me move really close my camera so you can see the differences in two paper. So it doesn't really matter for our class which paper do you have. So there is a variety of drawing paper. As long as the paper is the right size, I want you to draw on the large sphere. I want you to draw on 18 by 24 inch paper. So this is 18 by 24 size. Yeah, so there is the size, the same size over there. That's the same paper. And there is a variety of drawing surfaces, and we're just going to draw on one of them. It doesn't matter which one. So I wanted to show you a variety of approaches you can use with charcoal. This charcoal, it comes in a variety of shapes and forms. So this is willow charcoal. It's a little bit more bent. And there is also vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is a little bit more straight. And also charcoal comes in a variety of softness. So you can sometimes see on a box that says soft or medium or hard. So it doesn't really matter, but the soft charcoal is very easy to blend, and soft charcoal is sometimes very fragile. So when you draw something on your paper, and then you just go with your hand and see how this charcoal stays a little bit. You can see the drawing, but soft charcoal, you'll just wipe it out completely. Also, another thing, when you draw with charcoal, you sometimes can break it with your fingers and just have a little piece, and you can draw with the whole piece, putting it flat, putting it close on the paper like that. So see what kind of line you can get this way. So I think this is maybe softer charcoal. So see what happens when you raise it with your hand. Well, you still see a little bit of the trace here, but depending on how much you move your hand around, it might be erased completely. Use a paper towel instead. But some artists just love this tactile, including me. I really like touching paper with my fingers. So kind of you have to find balance and make sure that your hands are very clean before you started working with charcoal, so you haven't eaten just some hamburger before you started drawing. Wash your hands, make sure they're clean. But even clean hands have some oil in them, so be careful. Okay, so this is all charcoal sticks. Charcoal also comes in a compressed form. So in a stick, it's not a compressed charcoal, it's just regular charcoal. So I will also show you the same compressed charcoal also come in the shape of pencils. So I will be just showing you use of the pencils as a use of compressed charcoal, but you can use either way. You can choose sticks of compressed charcoal, and sticks also, they're better when you need to cover the big space, because you can put them just as the vine charcoal, just as a regular charcoal. You can put them on the side and cover big area right away. So you can cover big area quickly if it doesn't fall on you all the time. So I would recommend first try the whole page. It doesn't have to be this big page, but big page is nicer because you have more space to play with it. So I would just recommend you to play with it a little bit more. So then after you covered some big chunk of your paper with charcoal, I would recommend trying another approach. So kind of let's draw something. Let's draw oh, by the way, this is a compressed charcoal I found. The reason this is a small piece I found compressed charcoal. The reason I kind of feel how it's grabbing the paper a little bit more. It's kind of dragging the paper more, and when you rub it, see how it's harder to rub it. It sticks to the paper much more. it's compressed, so it's darker. And also when you rub it, instead of kind of disappearing, it gets darker there. See, wherever I'm rubbing it, it becomes darker. Okay, so it's really, remember, keep compressed charcoal for your darks. Okay, let me show you something else. I'm going to put my compressed charcoal separately because it's really hard to see which one is which. Okay, I'm coming back to my regular charcoal, and again I'm going to cover this area. And okay, let's see, I'm going to make a mess, and let's say I want to draw a vase. Okay, so I'm drawing a vase. Remember, you have to draw the vase, you have to make first lines straight, then you put the oval. Okay, so then I'm not going to put an oval right now. I'm going to draw a vertical line through the center of the vase, the bottom. Okay, so the bottom is here. So now here, remember always looking at both sides of the axis line. So this is our axis line, and then here and here should be the same distance. It's easy to measure with something. Measure, and then after you measure, then you can draw. Remember, first easier to draw with straight lines. Make sure this all lines are correct, and then you can make these lines curvy. Okay, so all this construction is very easy to do with charcoal because charcoal is so soft, and it will be so easy to erase all the construction lines. Let me just finish it with the oval. Okay, so the oval, remember how we're drawing a little circles in these corners just to make our oval more ovalish and not like a fish, right? So a little bit more oval. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the trick. So we're switching to the compressed pencil. By the way, look at my hands right now, what's going on. So be ready for that. Don't wear any clothes that is too clean for your drawing. Just exercise, just maybe put some old t-shirt that will be easy, something that will be easy to wash. Okay, so now after I constructed, okay, I actually still see that this vase is still not to my satisfaction. I see this is a little bit higher than this, so I'm going to make it a little bit better with the charcoal. And then after maybe this needs to be a bit more curvy. So after I constructed the best vase, and actually the bottom also needs to be a bit curvy. Okay, so now almost perfect. Okay, so I'm just drawing out of my head, so I don't really have any real vase I'm looking at. But anyway, so now I'm going to draw over these lines with the compressed charcoal. And see what's going to happen. Okay, so I have drawn all the lines that I want to keep, and everything else that was drawn with the regular charcoal, look, I'm erasing it. And what happens now, all the lines that I wanted to keep, that I have drawn with compressed charcoal, they stayed after I rubbed everything. How cool is that? So now I'm going to start using my eraser. So this is my kneaded eraser. I knead it like a dough. So what happens when you saw it was kind of black, it was full of charcoal because I worked with it before, and now as I'm kneading it, it becomes lighter, it becomes gray, it kind of absorbs all the charcoal inside it. So when you knead it, and you guys all have to have a little piece of this eraser, kneaded eraser, you can shape it any form you like. And then with this eraser, I'm going to first show you on this side where it just was kind of blob of black. You can draw with this eraser. You can draw, let me draw my name. So you can also draw your name. Aula, this is my name. It's actually, when you notice when you start drawing more and more with it, when it becomes full of charcoal, it stops drawing. So you have to knead it again, kind of knead a clean spot out of it. Make it into shape, a little pencil again. And here I can finish my signature. All right. So now what you can do with your drawing like that, now you can start adding highlights. Adding highlights, all right? So we'll have to shade it, I'll have to add more shadow. And the very interesting concept is the concept of terminator. Terminator is kind of imaginary line that separates light from dark. So I'll just maybe put my terminator. Terminator kind of describes the shape of the object. So this is the shadow part. And instead of inside the shadow part, there's still many variations. But first, when you put terminator, you kind of then you blend between light and shadow, make it soft transition. And then you can add more shadows. And remember, in the shadows, there should be reflected light. To make reflected light, we are not erasing reflecting light. We are just adding more dark. And then again, we are blending it with our finger. And you also notice when you blend it with the finger, it's also, especially if it's soft charcoal, you just take off instead of blending. So be very, very careful about blending. Don't take off too much charcoal when you want it darker. So just when you're playing, draw something that you kind of feel good about. It can be a cat, it can be a dog, it can be a vase, it can be a teapot, whatever you want to draw, just to practice. And also see how it's kind of, when you blend, these shadows become lighter, so they become too light. So what we can do, we can go over with compressed charcoal. When you go with compressed charcoal, remember all the marks that we studied with pencil, you can apply the same mark. So this is a cross contour hatching mark. So hatching means all the marks go in parallel to each other, but they're a little bit curvy linear because it's a round object. So, and I'm applying very, very light pressure because I don't want it to be too dark, and I still want to be able to blend. And remember, when you blend compressed charcoal, it becomes even darker. So this is what happens. You're blending it, it becomes darker. So I'm going to go over a little bit, even reflected light a little bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to go even darker. And now I'm going with cross hatching. And I'm not going to go too much with it. So we get some variation in the dark area, but what we started from shading it lightly in a dark zone, all just as one gray area, and now we're adding more variation. So some reflected light, some darker darks. Remember, reflected light is still considered to be in a dark zone. So some students often make this reflected light a little bit too light, almost competing with the highlight. It should never be light as anything on the light side. I probably should darken here some more. So remember, you kind of always have to think about where the light is coming from. So in this case, the light is coming from, guess where the light is coming from? Of course, it's coming from this side. So this is light source. But of course, in this case, it's imaginary light source. If you set up the light in your room and just kind of move the object and move the light around the object, you will be able to see the light. And remember this, the kind of schematic drawing that showed you 5 different areas of chiaroscuro, and chiaroscuro, as we already know, is the just a fancy word for shading. But not just shading, it's shading when you're creating the illusion of roundness of the object. So what do you need to create roundness of the object? You need 5 elements. You need highlight, so this is our highlight. you need some transitional light. You need the core shadow, and the core shadow is just the darkest shadow on the object. So this is core shadow. You need the reflected light, and we're missing something here. What we're missing? We are missing the core shadow, shadow on the object. We're missing the cast shadow. Cast shadow is the shadow that the object casts on the surface where it's standing at. So cast shadow is always kind of describing the surface on which the object is standing. So if this is the table, so then the cast shadow is going this way. So what if the cast shadow, let me just erase this for now, what if there was some fabric? There was a fabric or some other object laying here. Let me just kind of draw a fabric fold. Let's just say it was a fabric fold here. So if that's a fabric fold, kind of the fabric is going this way. So then the shadow would repeat the shape of this fabric fold and go up here, because the fold is kind of like a little cylinder going up. And then it would go down here. Okay, so have some fun with it. Okay, and again I'm getting my compressed charcoal. Cast shadow also is not evenly dark everywhere. So for example here, when it goes under this fold of the fabric, it might be a bit darker. When it goes closer to the object, it also gets darker, really close to the object. When it goes away from the object, it gets lighter. And the same happens with the edges. Edges are softer on the cast shadow, but as they go away from the object, they become even softer and even more soft. We also need to understand that, see, like my drawing right now is I would say nicely drawn, but it still has this outline. So we need to focus on getting rid of the outline, and instead of the outline, creating the edge. How do we do that? Shall we just erase the outline? No, I wouldn't say so. I would make the shading around this line. See how I'm shading the whole area outside? So now it looks like a fat line surrounding my vase. Instead of doing fat line, I'm going to go out and shade the whole area, kind of not repeating the same line around the vase, but kind of going more like trying to show the space around it. Here I'm assuming my table begins somewhere here, and I can create a soft transition, or instead of soft transition I can make a line like that. So this is the table, this is the vase. But see what happened? The line disappeared, the outline of the vase disappeared. Now we don't see it because we shaded everything around it. Okay, what's going on here? Here we can probably make a little bit darker the background, just to kind of get it closer to this, but we can also create illusion of it's being a little bit darker, but we also make it a little bit lighter over here, because we want this contrast with the dark side of the vase. So in some areas it will be almost no difference. We can even go over the vase and the background. We can kind of go over it and kind of destroy it, because then remember this line should be kind of continuation of this line. So it's okay to go over, because we can easily bring this back. How we're going to bring this back? So we can erase here just a little bit on this side. You see, when I erase, it just creates too much of the contrast. Now we kind of need to, whenever erased, we need to blend it back, make it softer. And we can also darken this side of the vase. And again, when we're darkening it, we have to go with the cross contour lines, so maybe hatching marks. Hatching marks or cross hatching marks. And see how now this line is disappearing. Instead of the line, we get the edge. Edge is a where the two areas, two spaces go side by side. So we see light area, which is negative space, and the dark area, which is a positive space. Positive, which is the object, the vase, the vase. And here on this side we see the negative space is darker, and the positive space of the vase is lighter. And again, we can go over with compressed charcoal over there a little bit, just to identify this area a little bit more. And so this is what we're calling working on the edges, making sure that the edges are edges and not the outlines. Sometimes you can erase just a little bit, kind of this line, if a line is too sharp and maybe the value we want here. We always have to decide what is lighter, what is darker, to create the edge instead of the outlines. So because to show the edge, we kind of have to make artistic decision. Okay, my decision is that I'm going to make this table darker than the vase, and that will be my artistic solution. And sometimes it's okay to go over a little bit, and just when we go over, this helps us to prevent to have the halo. So what I mean by halo, sometimes you see the drawing when students are doing, okay, and I tell them, okay, you need to put the background. So when they put the background, and they don't want to create a mess, so they shade like that, the background, and then they don't want to touch the object, so they go around and then they blend, and they're afraid to make a mess again, so they leave this white space around the object, and then they come back and shade the object. So, but they're afraid to cover this space, so it still looks like we've got some kind of girl with some kind of hair, right? But so that's the sphere, that's the background. So it shouldn't be. So instead, don't be afraid to just go over, erase everything, and then you can always darken what needs to be darker and lighten what needs to be lighter. And it will be much better representation of reality rather than just trying to not to mess up the edges. It's okay to mess up the edges because we can always bring them back. And again, the charcoal, it's soft charcoal, means soft, regular charcoal, very easy to erase and add to it and change things. So don't be afraid, it's actually good for you if you go over the edges. And in some areas, the lightness of the background will be the same as the lightness, the value, the light value of the background will be the same as the value of the object, and we call it lost edges. For example, here, well, I can define it a little bit, but in some area it will be lost, and that's okay because our eye is still making up this difference, and we can still see it as a sphere. So here we have a little bit of lost edge, which is okay. But the danger here, like if you're trying to adjust this and you start erasing around, again, see how sometimes we can erase it, but then we have to blend this to make this line disappear, and some students just leave it, and this is what I call halo. We can't really have halo. Halo is not our friend. it's not helping us. So we need to get rid of the halo and bring the whole object together again. But I'm not going to work on this anymore. I'm going to continue working this a little bit more on this vase to finish it. See what I created here, a little bit more softer but different. So vase is slightly lighter. Vase is slightly lighter than the background. Here vase will be darker in the background, but I'm going to put some highlight here on the on the fabric. I was attempting to show some of the soft folds on the fabric. Okay, and here again a little bit darker. So again, see, we're doing this for the sake of the edge. For the sake of the edge, to create edge instead of the outline. And remember that when we blend, I sometimes forget it and I do my shadows a little bit too dark, because I tend to like blending, and when I start blending, my shading with compressed charcoal sometimes gets too dark. But again, with charcoal it's so easy to fix things. So if you used compressed charcoal and it's now too dark and you want to lighten it, for example, like here I want to maybe lighten just a little bit here. Oh, let me show you my camera. A little bit here I want to create a little bit more reflected light. So I'm moving my eraser, my blending kneaded eraser, to a little pointed, kind of like a little pointed finger, and I'm going to dab like a little stippling mechanism, like little stippling there, and I'm going to touch a little bit there on the area that I want to lighten, and then I have to choose some cleaner area and shape it again and stipple some more and continue stippling, because remember, when you use it, it becomes less and less usable as much as charcoal it absorbs. So now I think I blended it. I didn't want to lighten it too much, so I kind of took a little bit of charcoal away and let it go. And then also you can kind of, you don't want to make it too light. Remember, reflected light can never be too light. Reflected light should always be darker than anything on the light side. Also another trick, when you see how dirty my hand began, you can also draw with your dirty fingers. So if you, like for example here in this area, I want to darken this just a little bit, but I don't want to darken it too much, so I can just touch it with my dirty finger and it will be a little bit darker. Here we go. And now I can lighten it just a little bit on the top. And blend again here. So there is a lot of fun drawing with charcoal. So I want you to try different things, play with different things, and create your first drawing, just kind of experimenting, whatever you can do. Draw something simple. Don't plan to do something with lots and lots of details. Just draw something simple and something that you can easily describe light and dark on. Some students who like to draw a portrait, if you want to, you can choose a portrait, but draw from a good photograph that has a good chiaroscuro on it. If you're drawing from your imagination, if you have experience, you probably can do it, but even for experienced artists, it's always good to have a good source. So find a good photograph and draw for fun, the first page. I cannot stop myself drawing now. Alright.